All right. So enhancing storytelling through interactive film. So interactive film has existed for many years, and with some of the first interactive films dating back to the 1960s, interactive films are a unique blend of narrative films, traditional narrative films, and other interactive content such as video games. And they combine elements of choice and interaction that video games provide while also including storytelling and traditional filmmaking techniques. So unlike traditional narrative films, interactive films offer um, a the viewer the ability to make different choices, both big and small, that will overall impact the course of the film. And this is a fairly new film genre, and it's kind of struggled to make huge waves in film industry for various reasons. But despite all of this, interactive films um, and interactive content as a whole offer unique levels of interactivity and engagement with the audience, which ultimately enhances the overall storytelling experience. And some recent interactive films, such as Black Mirror Bandersnatch from 2018, have garnered a lot of positive attention in recent years, and it's one of the more notable ones released through Netflix. Ooh, it's not switching. Oh, there it is. Okay. So before we dive into interactive films and interactive elements, here's a little bit about myself. So my name is Bryson Ohtani-Quartero. I graduated from Milani High School in 2020. I'm a four-year student. I was at Leeward Community College for 2 years, and then I transferred to UH West Oahu in fall of 2022. And my program of study is creative media with a concentration in general creative media. So here's a quick summary of what I'm going to be discussing today. So I'm going to go over my thesis statement and some of the background information and research surrounding interactive films and interactive content. And then I'll shift my focus into my objective and my rationale behind the research conducted and my project. I'll explain my plans for my senior capstone project before addressing the significance of my project and the research that I have done throughout the semester. So in order to discuss interactive films and its content, we first need to define interactivity. And so for our purposes, interactivity is going to be a two-way relationship between a participant and the content itself. And the participant affects the content, and the content affects the participant. So in other words, the participant will make choices that will ultimately alter the content and the way it responds, and then the way the content responds will ultimately affect how the participant reacts and perceives the content moving forward. And so they're both changing and growing together through this two-way relationship, and that's interactivity. So all interactive film content follows a hierarchical branching structure. And so hierarchical branching is different from traditional narrative like linear story structure. So think of a film as being a singular road going from one start point to an end point. So you're just watching a film from start to finish, and that's the traditional narrative structure. But hierarchical branching, on the other hand, starts from one starting point and it eventually branches off down multiple roads, and those roads will branch off into more roads. And so it'll eventually lead to multiple different endpoints. And this is the concept of hierarchical branching and is the structure for interactive film content. And it allows the viewer to make a series of choices that affect the overall storyline, and it'll eventually lead the viewer to one ending out of a set of multiple endings. So interactive films, despite its many challenges to create and produce compared to traditional works, offers a new level of unique, immersive, and positive engagement with the audience in a modern media landscape where challenges to engage with audiences continue to emerge. So for this project, I set out to show how interactive content can be a powerful tool to engage with audiences and tell impactful stories. So the objective or rationale for this research project was to explore a different storytelling medium and to analyze new ways of enhancing storytelling and engagement by looking into different interactive storytelling techniques used through various interactive media. So I have a very strong interest in creating films. It's something that I really like doing, both creative narrative works, but also documentary style works. And I just like the storytelling aspect of it. And then I also really enjoy interactive content and experiences. I used to work in an escape room and I enjoyed all of those kinds of interactive experiences. So this project felt like the perfect blend of those interests. So interactive film is also a fairly unexplored medium compared to traditional narrative works. And some of the various reasons include being cost and time to produce, resource constraints, due to the complex branching narratives that it takes to write and script and storyboard and film and put the whole product together. But because media is constantly changing and evolving, I think it's important to be able to evolve the way that we engage with audiences. And interactive films is one of the ways to do so. And many interactive films from recent years inspired me for this project. As mentioned before, Black Mirror Bandersnatch from 2018, Late Shift from 2016, which was another film that was released it's kind of like a blend between video game and film content. And then this year, another film released on Netflix. It was a romantic comedy. It was Choose Love, which was a romantic comedy, a comedical take on interactive film. In terms of my plan, so my plan was to develop a project that consists of a series of videos that interconnect into one interactive story using different interactive elements to enhance the story and engage with the audience, while examining the level of engagement with that content. So in other words, this project is taking all of the research from the semester and kind of putting that into practice. And I plan to use elements from various types of interactive media research throughout the semester to further enhance the engagement and the storytelling. So for example, I plan to use evocative narrative elements or E&Es and incorporate the idea of variable state environments within the project. Evocative narrative elements come from video games and are considered any object, character, storyline, or challenge that a player faces, and the player is able to co-create and change the story based on their interaction with these evocative narrative elements. And this helps change their perception and shape their perception of the virtual space. And variable state environments are a more complex version of hierarchical branching, and it focuses more on the complexity of the environments and the interactions with these specific E&Es. So if you interact with an evocative narrative element in a certain way, they'll respond accordingly. And instead of picking one branching path over another, which is very typical for interactive films, the player is able to directly interact within the environment itself and have it change the course of the story. And so these two elements are kind of go hand in hand, and they're very connected. So I plan to apply these concepts in my final work by allowing the viewer to interact with the actual environment in a more complex way than just picking between certain options. And this is just one example of how I plan to put the research in a more practical approach. So in terms of significance, so interactive films act as a balancing act between video game interactive content and traditional narrative film. And when autonomy, competence, or relatedness are involved in the structure of interactive content, the experience of the content is more likely to be enhanced. So interactive content engages with the audience in a very specific way through self-determination theory, which examines people's intrinsic and extrinsic motivations, their personality, as well as their basic psychological needs to determine what choices they're going to make. And when basic psychological needs such as autonomy, competency, and relatedness are met, the overall experience is much more likely to be enhanced within the interactive content. And so autonomy being the ability to make your own decisions, competency being the idea of having the skills, experiences, and knowledge to make said decisions, and relatedness being more of the social aspect, which is the ability to relate to others and have a sense of belonging with other people. And so interactive content makes use of these psychological needs to enhance the storytelling experience. And so understanding the roles that these different storytelling psychological techniques play in interactive content will help interactive media continue to better engage with audiences moving forward. And so immersive and engaging experiences allow audiences to be more connected with the story, and interactive films allow for a more engaging kind of story that allows the viewer to be involved in how the story unfolds. Media is constantly changing, and interactive films provide storytellers with a different avenue to engage with their audience and tell more complex stories moving forward. Interactive films offer a lot of creative freedom, and there isn't a single story, and as it's not just a single story that there is to tell, but a more complex web of stories to tell. And in a linear story, each viewer generally perceives the story in a slightly different way, but it's a little bit more limited as it's just one story from start to finish. Um, but when working with an interactive film with multiple branching paths, each viewer's interpretations of events and how they perceive the world changes. So not only are the events changing based on the viewer's choices that they're making, but their interpretations of events also change based on their experiences and the events that they're perceiving. And this offers a different level of complexity and rewatchability and fuels engagement, which allows the viewer to be more connected to the story and its characters as they're actively participating in how the world changes. So some data and statistics. This one is focusing specifically more on the first point of significance, which is just interactive content in general and how it enhances engagement with audiences. Interactive content generates up to 5 times more views than static content, and it's more likely to get the message across as it's more exposure for that content. 81% of marketers agree that it does increase that level of engagement due to that kind of content. And how it engages with audiences will help us continue to find new ways to engage with audiences moving forward. In terms of this slide for data, it's from Netflix's Black Mirror Bandersnatch. This one focuses more so on the second point of significance, and it shows how complex storytelling can lead to more complex engagement and interpretations of the story. So this is a more practical example of that interaction between the content and the participant. So these are emotional reactions from different Bandersnatch endings, one of them being from an ending including Chop and the other one including a balcony ending. And both of them are involve death in some kind of way, but they're both vastly different in their tone and how the viewer has gotten to that point. And so certain aspects stay the same as they both involve death. Sadness is a very large chunk of these emotional reactions, but some notable examples: fear and disgust, or fear doesn't really change, but disgust grows from 3 to 10% when looking at the Chop ending, 28 to 43% for anger. And this is just one way of looking at a more practical example of how the viewer changes based on their interpretations and their perceptions of the events that have occurred and the choices that they've made throughout the story. So target audience for this project is geared more towards younger audiences, age group 13 to 25. Typically, younger audiences are more receptive to interactive media and interactive experiences, but anyone with an interest in interactive experiences, including video games and interactive films and other types of interactive experiences, would fall under this target audience as well. And so engagement and immersion are important in storytelling to allow the viewer to feel more connected to the story. And so my proposed solution is to create a video series that uses interactive storytelling techniques from various types of interactive media to further drive interactivity, engagement, and immersion with an audience. And just pulling from all of these different various medias to try to enhance the story and enhance engagement. And so in terms of preparation and process, so pre-production would involve writing script, storyboard, picking out locations, and casting the video series. And so due to the fact that it's a interactive film and not just a traditional linear film, it's going to take more time in this part of the process. And so I'm planning on making a more complex way of trying to storyboard it by trying to visualize the branching paths and then drawing out the storyboards in that way. So I can see all the major branching points, but also still be able to storyboard and visualize the project. In terms of production, multiple shooting days covering multiple branching storylines. So if the pre-production's a little bit more hefty in terms of how the storyline is getting put together, the production is going to also be a little bit more complex in how they're shot. And then in post-production, editing, sound design, graphic design, and then also um, social media integration would come into play here. This video series would be on YouTube, so that I would be able to create those branching storylines and narratives. And in terms of kind of concept of how I wanted it to look, I'm going for a little bit more of a cinematic feel, but also going for kind of a more serious kind of tone for this film. I gave the examples of my inspiration on this deliverable slide. So Late Shift is in the bottom right, Black Mirror Bandersnatch is in the top right. And you can kind of see how they're shot. They're kind of shot in more of a cinematic way, with the choices appearing at the bottom of the screen. But I also included a heist with Markiplier from the YouTuber Markiplier from 2019, because since I'm planning on having the film be on as a YouTube video series, it's important to note what I visualize it looking like in that sense. So that's the example in the bottom left as well. But that covers basically everything for my plans for my project this semester. So yeah, thank you for listening. And if you have any questions as well.